At 2:14 in the morning, my phone lit up on the nightstand, and it was a video from my 15-year-old grandson. And underneath it were 3 words that I will keep in my heart until the day I die. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I was 72 years old, awake the way old men are awake at 2 in the morning. And I lay there in the dark and watched a video my own grandson had secretly recorded of me. And I understood, slowly, that the boy hadn't sent it to hurt me. He'd sent it to save me. Because what was on that video wasn't what his father had told him to capture. It was something else entirely. It was the truth. And the boy had been brave enough, at 2 in the morning, alone, to send it to the one person it would cost him the most to send it to. What was on that video changed everything. It didn't just change how I saw my grandson, it changed everything I thought I knew about my own son. But I'll get to what was on it. First, you need to understand how a good 15-year-old boy ended up hiding a phone to secretly film his own grandfather. My name is Walt Kessler. I'm 72 years old, and I taught history and coached basketball at the same high school for 34 years, which means half this town once sat in my classroom. I've been a quiet man my whole life, not slow. A teacher learns to watch a room and read it without saying a word, and I read my own family far better than they ever knew. They just mistook my quiet for weakness. It's usually the last mistake people make with me. My wife, Anne, passed 8 years ago. I live alone in the house we paid off 30 years ago, and I promise you, as sharp at 72 as I was at 50, which becomes important later because my son spent a good deal of effort trying to convince people otherwise. I have one son, Mark. He started a construction company in his 30s, and for a while it did well, and Mark spent like it always would. Then the work dried up. And Mark, who'd never saved a dollar, found himself underwater and sinking. And the thing about a man going under is that he reaches for whoever's closest. The closest person, with a paid-off house and a teacher's careful retirement, was me. 2 years ago, Mark came to me, embarrassed, and asked for help. And I love my son, so I gave him $45,000, most of what was left of Anne's life insurance. He promised it was a one-time thing. He did not turn it around. Within a year, he was deeper, and he came back, and this time the embarrassment was gone. He wanted me to remortgage my house, my paid-off house, the only thing I had left to leave behind. $200,000 to bail out a business that was already a corpse. And when I said no, gently but firmly, my son looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. He looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. That conversation got ugly. He said I'd always held money over him. He said, "What are you even saving it for, Dad? You're 72. You can't take it with you." He left, slamming the door. And I understood that my son had stopped seeing me as his father. He'd started seeing me as an obstacle between him and money he'd already decided was his. Now, I have to tell you about my grandson, because Jake is the heart of this whole thing. Jake is Mark's son, 15 years old, and from the time he was small, Jake and I were close in the way a quiet grandfather and a quiet boy can be. He was a watcher, like me. He loved history, loved my old stories, loved coming to my house on Saturdays where it was calm, away from the tension in his own home. I taught him chess. I taught him to shoot a free throw. When Anne was alive, she'd make him grilled cheese cut into triangles, and after she passed, I learned to make them myself, badly, and Jake ate them anyway and never said a word. That's the kind of boy he is. When Jake was 11, he came over upset one Saturday, and instead of pushing him, I just set up the chessboard, because Jake always talked easier when his hands were busy. And at the end, he looked at the board and said, "Grandpa, how come it's easier to think here?" and I told him it was because nobody at my house was ever going to yell, and that a person thinks clearest where they feel safe, and he could come think at my house any time for the rest of his life. I had no idea, saying it, that one day being that safe place would be the most important thing I ever did for that boy. As Mark's troubles got worse, I saw less of Jake. Then, about 2 months ago, Jake started coming around again, and I was so happy to see my grandson that I didn't, at first, notice anything strange about it. He'd come over on a Saturday, like the old days, but he was off, nervous. He kept his phone out more than he used to, propped up against things, angled toward me. He started asking me odd questions, the same questions twice. "Grandpa, what day is it? Do you remember what we did last week? Where do you keep your bank papers?" Strange questions for a boy. Once he asked me, out of nowhere, if I ever got confused, and he wouldn't look at me when he asked it. I'm a teacher. I notice patterns. And slowly, with a sick feeling growing in my stomach, I noticed the pattern. The phone, always angled at me. The repeated questions. The questions about my memory, my money, my papers. And one Saturday, while Jake was in the bathroom, I glanced at his phone where he'd left it propped against the sugar bowl, pointed at my chair, and I saw that it was recording. A little red dot. My grandson was filming me. I sat very still and looked at that little red dot. I had 30 seconds before he came back. My first instinct was to grab the phone, to stop it, to confront it. But 34 years of not reacting to the first thing a frightened kid does told me to wait. So I took a breath, and I straightened the newspaper, and I sat back like nothing was wrong. And when Jake came back, I smiled at my grandson and asked if he wanted a grilled cheese, and I watched the relief and the guilt fight on his young face, and my heart broke clean down the middle. Because even then, I knew Jake. This wasn't his idea. A boy doesn't wake up one morning and decide to secretly film his grandfather. Someone put him up to it. Someone handed a 15-year-old job no 15-year-old should ever be given, and told him it was the right thing to do. And that someone was the boy's own father. Mark was building a case. I understood it all at once. Having failed to guilt me into remortgaging my house, he'd moved to his next play. He was going to prove that I couldn't be trusted with my own money, gather evidence that the old man was slipping so he could pressure me, or pressure the family into pressuring me. And to get that evidence, he was using the one person I could never refuse, his son, my grandson. He'd aimed his own boy at me like a weapon. I was not angry at Jake. Not one part of me pointed at the boy, because I knew exactly what I was looking at. Not a sneak, a good kid, crushed between loving his grandfather and obeying his father, put in an impossible position by an adult who should have protected him. The footage wasn't Jake's betrayal, it was Mark's. Jake was just the boy holding the camera he'd been handed. So I made a decision. I decided to trust my grandson, not to confront him, not yet, because I believed that if I just kept being exactly what I'd always been to Jake, calm and kind and sharp and good, the boy holding that camera would eventually see what he was actually filming. I was betting on Jake's heart. I'd watched it grow for 15 years. So, for the next few weeks, I let my grandson film me, and I never let on that I knew. I helped him with his history homework, patient and clear and sharp as a tack, because if he was going to record me, then by God he was going to record the truth. I let the camera see exactly who his grandfather really was. Those weeks were hard.
because Jake was miserable. He'd angle that phone and then couldn't look at me. Twice he started to say something and stopped. One Saturday he asked me very carefully, "Grandpa, if somebody asked you to do something and you knew it was wrong, but the person asking was your family, what would you do?" And my heart about came out of my chest. I said, "Jake, the people who really love you never ask you to do something that makes you hate yourself. And if they do ask, the love is in the refusing." He went very still. I don't know if he understood right then that I was talking straight to the thing eating him alive, but I planted it. And a few weeks later, at 2 in the morning, it bloomed. I'll tell you now what was on that video. Jake didn't send me the clips his father wanted. He sent me everything, the whole recording, unedited, from a Saturday 2 weeks before. And it didn't start with me. It started in a car, because Jake had started his recording before he ever got to my house and left it running, and the first 4 minutes weren't of me at all. They were of Mark and his wife, Stephanie, in the front seat, coaching their son. I lay in the dark and listened to my son instruct my grandson. Just get him talking and let him ramble. Ask him the same thing a couple times. Get him to repeat himself. That always looks bad. Ask about the bank stuff. See if he gets flustered. And Stephanie, and if he forgets anything, make sure you got it. We need enough to show everybody he can't handle his own money. Once we get him declared not competent, the house, the accounts, all of it comes to us to manage, and then we're fine, Jakey. And Mark again, he's a stubborn old man, Jake. He won't help us the easy way, so we do it this way. It's for his own good anyway. He doesn't need all that money. We do. He doesn't need all that money. We do. My son, in a car, to my grandson, about me. And then the recording got to my house, and it caught the rest of the afternoon. And here's what broke the spell his father had put him under. The contrast. After 4 minutes of his parents plotting about a confused, declining old man, the video showed the actual old man helping Jake with a history essay, sharp and clear, asking Jake about his life, listening, present, whole. Jake had been sent to film evidence that I was losing my mind, and instead his camera had captured his scheming parents and his completely lucid grandfather side by side. And a 15-year-old boy, alone at 2 in the morning, had finally seen which of us was telling him the truth. So he sent it to me, all of it, with 3 words. "Grandpa, I'm sorry." I cried, sitting there in the dark, not for myself, for him, for what it cost that boy to send it, to choose his grandfather's truth over his parents' lie, knowing what it might do to his family. That is the bravest thing anyone in my family has ever done, and it was done by a 15-year-old at 2 in the morning, and he signed it with an apology, as if he were the one who'd done wrong. I texted him back, 3 words of my own. "You did right." And then, "I love you. None of this is your fault. Go to sleep. Grandpa's got it now." And Grandpa had it now. I had Mark and Stephanie on tape, in their own voices planning to have me declared incompetent and seize my home, using their child to do it. With that recording, I could have done almost anything. But there was a problem with every plan, and the problem's name was Jake. Anything public, anything with the law would expose that the boy handed it to me, and then Jake would pay the price for doing the right thing. I would not do that to him. The whole reason the boy mattered more than the revenge was that protecting him was the revenge. So I did it quietly. I called Mark and asked him to come over, alone, for a talk about the money.
He came, I'm sure, thinking the old man had finally cracked. He sat down at my kitchen table, and I poured him a coffee, and I set my phone on the table between us, and I pressed play. I watched my son listen to his own voice. I watched the color leave his face. And before he could ask how, I told him the one lie I have ever been glad to tell. I told him I'd found the recording on a phone Jake left at my house by accident, that the boy had no idea it had reached me. I built my grandson an alibi right there, so whatever happened next would never land on him. Mark tried, the way they all try when caught. He said it wasn't what it sounded like. He said he was drowning, that I didn't understand what it was like to drown. And for a second, the father reflex kicked in, the one that wants to save your child from the water. And then I remembered whose hand he'd tried to pull under with him, his own son's. That's the line where a father's mercy has to stop. And then I told my son how it was going to be. No remortgage, no $200,000, not managing my affairs, not ever. And that this recording would sit in 3 safe places, and if he ever again tried to take my home or my money, or if he ever made his son carry 1 more ounce of his father's weight, the entire family would hear exactly what he'd said in that car. I didn't raise my voice. I have never once needed to raise my voice. And my son folded, right there at the table. He put his face in his hands because there was nothing left to do. The scheme was dead, caught not by a lawyer, but by his own father holding his own words. He asked me quietly how I could be so calm, and I told him the truth. Because I'm not doing this to hurt you, Mark. I'm doing this to protect your son from you. You handed a 15-year-old a camera and told him to destroy the one person who makes him feel safe. That's the thing I can't forgive, not the money, the boy. There was one more thing, and it mattered more than the rest. I told Mark that Jake was going to spend weekends at my house again, the regular way, and that if I ever got the sense the boy was being punished, frozen out, made to feel like a traitor in his own home, the deal was off and the recording went out. Jake would have a safe place, and his father was going to make sure of it. Mark agreed. What else could he? That was 3 months ago. Mark got into a debt counseling program and started, for the first time in his life, doing the slow, unglamorous work of digging out honestly. I won't pretend he's a changed man, but he's a watched man, and sometimes that's enough to keep a weak one walking straight. And Jake comes over every Saturday now. We do chess and history and free throws and bad grilled cheese, and a few weeks ago he asked me if I was still mad at him. And I put down what I was holding, and I looked that boy in the eye, and I said, "Jake, you did the single bravest thing I have ever seen a person do. You told the truth when it cost you everything to tell it. Most grown men never manage that once. You did it at 15, at 2 in the morning, alone. I have never been prouder of anyone in my life." And my grandson, too cool for most things, put his head down on my kitchen table and cried, and I put my old hand on the back of his neck, and we sat there a while, and it was the proudest moment of my whole life. My son tried to use my grandson as a weapon against me. He never understood that you cannot aim a good kid at the people he loves and expect him to fire. You hand a boy like Jake a camera to capture a lie, and given enough time, he'll point it at the truth instead, even when the truth costs him his whole world. My son built a case to prove I'd lost my mind. His own son proved I hadn't, and proved at 2 in the morning with 3 small words that he had a heart bigger than the whole sinking ship of a family he was born into. They sent a boy to betray me. He came back the best man in the family. I just had to be there and be worth it, so there'd be somewhere safe for him to land when he did.